I'd like to introduce our presenter for today, Mike Martin. Mike is the Practice Director for Information Governance at BTRG. He brings more than 20 years of experience in information governance, specializing in information lifecycle governance, information management, and enterprise content management. Mike also has over 20 years of experience as a PeopleSoft consultant across various industry sectors. Thank you so much again for joining us, and now we'll get started with our presentation. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you, Desi. I appreciate it. And again, apologize to everyone. Apparently, GoToMeeting was having some issues today with their audio. Luckily, it resolved itself in time there. So today we'll just give you a quick introduction to BTRG and why we're speaking on this topic today. And then we'll dive right into understanding why data breaches are so costly, and we have some statistics to share there. And then we'll zone in on what we often find in our client base as some hidden gaps there in PeopleSoft security, and how, with a particular focus on PeopleSoft, we can make the PeopleSoft environment much more robust and much more secure. And to do that, we'll talk about best practices to make sure that you're reducing risk and ensuring compliance of PeopleSoft. So about BTRG, we, as Desi said, have been around for 20 years. I myself was a PeopleSoft consultant for many years. I've moved into an information governance role and really have been focused for the last 7 or so years on information governance techniques, but bringing my PeopleSoft background to that, and really at BTRG we really focus on that. So you can see we were one of the first PeopleSoft partners. We actually trace our roots all the way back to a beta site for PeopleSoft GL, where the president of the company worked on the very first version of PeopleSoft Financials. We've basically worked on every version of PeopleSoft since then, and we are very involved with the 9.2 release, really recommending the upgrade to 9.2 for our clients. We're involved with the testing of that with Oracle, and we have several of our clients already moving to 9.2 with some of those projects underway. So that's sort of the PeopleSoft Oracle side of the house. And then on my practice side, where information governance, we're really focused on package solutions, creating software that augments some of what we do with Oracle and IBM. IBM is really the leader in information governance, and so we've aligned with them, and we bring their solutions to bear. And we actually won an award for one of our add-ins to IBM software recently, the Beacon Award, which was very prestigious, and we were happy to win that. So we really focus on information governance. I like to say it less as a burden and much more as a way to save millions and millions of dollars. So we see it as a real business driver and a cost driver, not something that we just have to do because we're required to do it. You can see we work across a lot of industries and have application expertise across packages, but again, really deep in PeopleSoft, and that's where the majority of the work we've done over the 20 years has been. So focusing on data security, we really see it as being much more important now than ever, and this is a trend, right? So I think I would say the same thing next year and every year after, until we can really get maybe a handle on this. If you look at the State of the Union address this year, President Obama actually brought this up in his, and here's the quote from him. And so if it's being risen, this issue is being addressed at the level of the State of the Union, we know it's at the forefront of what we need to be looking at. And again, I echo, we don't want to look back years from now and say, boy, we should have done something. Even later this year and look back and say, boy, that data breach we just had, if only we were able to avoid that. So if we look at some of the business drivers, right now there's a statistic that says only half of the data in the world that should be protected is currently being protected. That's very alarming that we're only halfway there. And 94% of those surveyed in a recent Ponemon study said they had at least one breach. 94. That is a really alarming statistic. That's insanely high, and we want to change that. And actually, there are trends where it's trending up, right? So if you look in 2010, 29% had more than 5 incidences of a data breach, 45% last year. So that's a curve that we want to see going in the other direction. And of course, there's some new HIPAA regulations that take effect next month. So those will increase the cost there. So another driver if you're subject to HIPAA regulation. So if we look at, again, quoting some statistics from the Ponemon study, who really looks at data security in IT, 194 is the cost per row, per record um, in a database. 5.5 million is the cost of a data breach, average cost. And actually, I think that's quite low, although I guess we see some low data breaches. Some of the statistics we'll look at in a second, much higher than 5 million. And 6.8 billion across the industry. So very significant numbers here. And really remember that $194 per row. Think about how many rows are in your PeopleSoft database or databases today. So looking at some industries now in higher ed, you can see some of the breaches that happened recently, most recently University of Nebraska in May of this year. That breach, and that was a specific PeopleSoft breach, that's quoted as costing them $92 million. That's more money than I'm sure their entire PeopleSoft budget, maybe ever. So that's the kind of numbers that we really don't want to ignore any longer. If you look at healthcare, here's some of the top breaches here. And you can see these hundreds of thousands of records that are stolen across these examples. So if we think back about that $194 per record, we start to add these up, and you can see that we're talking hundreds of millions, or at least multi-million dollars. The cheapest one being 19 millions. I certainly wouldn't want a $19 million bill that I didn't account for, right? These would all be costs that are certainly never budgeted for and can be extremely damaging to an organization. Another industry, looking at government, you can see some examples here. Again, 3.3 million account numbers, those would count as records, 3 million tax returns. You can see the numbers here, 700,000, 800,000, 1.7 gigabytes. Lots of numbers here, and if we do the math on these, it's really staggering, the costs. And then where do these breaches happen, right? So if we look at what's on many folks' minds nowadays around mobile or data in the cloud, you can see that that may be where we think our sensitivity lies. But what's actually true is that we see the most sensitive areas are database servers. And it makes sense. If you think about the amount of data that may be actually on somebody's phone versus what's in our database server, where our PeopleSoft environments live. That's where our sensitive data really is, and we see the trend there showing that that is where data breaches happen most often. So we really need to secure those databases, both for PeopleSoft and our other database environments. So I'll go ahead and launch a poll right now. I'm just wondering if anyone has been familiar with your organization having a data breach. We certainly won't use this information outside this environment, so you can feel confident in answering that. And I'd really would appreciate if everyone would just go ahead and answer that phone line. Share the results there. So you can see lots of folks unsure, 21% yes, 33 no. I guess I would challenge the thing that we see very often is that people just aren't sure that they've had one, right? So even at 94% being breached, chances are you may have been breached, but you don't even know it, right? And that's the scariest thing to consider. But certainly some numbers there that say, we either know of a breach or we're unsure, right? Which is also a scary place to be. So thank you very much for responding to the poll. So now just to focus a little bit on PeopleSoft and what we see, just to run down where those gaps actually are. First gap is too much data, right? We have data overload. If you look at the way data growth is happening, 90% of all the world's data was created in the last 2 years. That's an alarming rate of growth. And we see PeopleSoft environments are mature now. They've been around for years, and data is accumulating, and data tends to create more data, right? So if we have too much data, that means lots of risk. Big data, big risk. Large data, the higher the risk. We have more that can be stolen. The more records we have, we multiply it by 194. You can see where that goes, right? Many PeopleSoft customers today don't necessarily have an archiving strategy, or if they do, maybe they are moving data from one table in the database to another. So if you're using built-in PeopleSoft archiving, what you tend to do there is copy data from the transaction table, like voucher, to the history table, voucher history, or other historical tables. What that means, though, is that data is still in the database, still potential to be breached, and we're proliferating that around, right? What we see is most PeopleSoft customers take a full copy of their production environment, copy it to the non-production environments. I have yet to be at a customer where I've seen less than 3 environments. Usually it's much more than that. You got your production, you may have a production copy for performance or data debugging, production support, test, development, QA, et cetera, right? So if we're copying the full amount, we are actually multiplying the data over and over again. So lots of data. So that's where we see, where we want to do is reduce the data in production, less data, get rid of that legacy data, reducing our risk. Another thing we see is not currently masking data. So again, with this idea of copying production down to non-production environments, if we're not masking data, then we're producing that risk there. We often see certainly lots of sensitive data in PeopleSoft HR with personally identifiable information. You may have customer information, vendor information, and financials or supply chain, and certainly campus will have PII in it as well, personally identifiable information. So oftentimes production is a non-production is a more open environment. We have more access there. We may have consultants logging into these systems. Maybe we have more open database level access, ability to run SQL against that database. So if we're moving our production data down, it doesn't matter, right? Our production may be secure, but we have different security in lower regions, and therefore, it doesn't matter, right? We're exposing that data. So if you have anything less than the same level of security that you have in production, and you're copying production data, that's a giant risk. And then, of course, the upgrade process. With PeopleSoft 9.2, upgrades do tend to create more data. Perhaps there's new columns or tables get split, and we do tend to create more data in there. More features and functions tend to create more data. Security configuration may change between your versions, so you might find that as you go through your upgrade process, you need to adjust security, and you may not necessarily be monitoring what is our security level now at the current version, and then has it changed in the new version? Are there any vulnerabilities been introduced through the upgrade process? You want to be really careful about that. And unless you have a tool to analyze those, or you're really focused on that analysis, you may miss it. So upgrades tend to produce some security gaps as well. Also, the upgrade process itself, we may hire a consulting firm such as BTRG to come in and help you with your upgrade, and therefore we have some more open access. We also spin up additional environments to facilitate the upgrade process. Again, duplicating data. If we're not masking that data, more risk there as well. Looking at system administration, a bit of a lower level than the application, what we see sometimes is no segregation of duties. And what I mean by that is we have our system admin folks, our database administrators, oftentimes tasked with maintaining the security of our environment. Well, who's monitoring them? How do we know that the privileged users like DBAs, sysadmins, and even developers aren't doing things they're not supposed to if we grant them that access? So what we want to do is segregate the maintenance of the system, the administration of the system, and the security of the system. Folks who are supposed to maintain and implement changes and need a high degree of access, if we monitor them separately and monitor those privileged users, and those privileged users are not in control of that monitoring, then we are more secure. For example, if we're using database logs to keep track of what's happening in our database, a DBA can go in, change the log, turn off the log, do something they're not supposed to, then erase all traces of that action. We want to prevent that. So unless you're externally monitoring your database activity from outside of the database, from outside privileged users, you have a gap. You may have a risk there. Also looking outside of PeopleSoft, if we're masking personal information like social security number, address, name, etc., does that information exist outside the system? If my name is being masked in PeopleSoft, what about my resume? Has that been attached to the HR? The forms, my HR forms, does it have my social security number on my W-2? You want to really look at documents and images, report files, PDFs, things like that. If you're using reporting, from outside the system, XML Publisher or Crystal or, any of those reports, and those are generated, stored in a file repository, you want to make sure you're dealing with those as well. And then, when we store that data, is it encrypted? Are we masking it? Have we reduced the footprint there? Again, are we keeping all of these copies? Employees been terminated and maybe we close them out in the system. Maybe we even archived their data out of PeopleSoft, but did we leave their resume and their forms around? Right? So you want to take really an enterprise approach, which certainly looking at PeopleSoft is a great place to start. But then looking beyond, what are the attachments and the non-structured data that's related to PeopleSoft? And then, of course, PeopleSoft rarely exists in a vacuum. So what are the interfaces in and out of PeopleSoft? What other systems? Where else is my HR data? You want to really take an enterprise approach to make sure that you're secure not only within PeopleSoft, but also across the enterprise. And then another gap is lack of cyber attack prevention. We do often focus when we think about security on network security, firewalls, even virus protection. But when we think about databases, what if someone does get in, or we actually allow access to certain areas of our network or through the firewall for a legitimate reason? But then are we able to prevent unauthorized access to PeopleSoft? So say we give them access to some other application, how can we be sure they're not logging into PeopleSoft and pulling social security numbers to sell, for example? So we want to have a thorough all of the access to PeopleSoft, including through normal channels, even through the app server. We want to make sure that we're monitoring what's happening there and alerting should something happen either outside of our policy or outside of normal business activities. You want to be able to alert that independently. And then, of course, you want to be able to terminate should you find it, right? So if we see a cyber attack happening in progress, do we have the ability to stop it? Do we have automatic controls in place that say, you know what, if you break a policy, your connection is terminated? Or if you're logging in from anything but the application server or these authorized channels, you're terminated. We want that control in place, and we see many customers do not have that today. So based on those, I'd like to go ahead and launch another poll now that we've covered those. Just to see where you feel that you are. So based on what we've talked about, too much data, copying data to non-production, not externally monitoring, segregation of duties, all of those gaps, let us know where you feel that you rank. So very, very interesting results here. 59% partially protected, 9% not, and 15 unsure. So 81% there in a risk category, 19% fully protected. And I would definitely love to hear from the 19% to hear what types of things you're doing to be fully protected, and certainly share notes there to get a sense of what types of things you're doing, because that's an area that we'd like to hear more about. So if you want to type it in the chat window, or you can send us, you can send me an email with some information, or we can arrange a time to talk. That would be very interesting to us. So I'll go ahead and hide those results. So again, most people feel they agree with us that there are gaps in where you are today. So let's talk about things we can do about it. Best practices to try and address. So of course, these are going to be driven directly from where we find the gaps. So number one, manage your data overload, right? Let's have less data in our environments. Not only will that create more security, it will also give us the benefit of reducing costs. cost, right? If we have less data, it'll cost a lot less, perhaps even increase the performance of our PeopleSoft environment and just make it all much more easy to manage. So what we do is we look at archiving, and by that we mean let's take the data out of PeopleSoft, actually remove it, not go from table A to table B, but remove it from PeopleSoft to a very secure, unchangeable, locked in state, and compress it, right? Get it out of that database offline to a secure place that we can still access very, very robustly, but get it out of PeopleSoft. And while at the same time doing that without breaking PeopleSoft, of course, right? Legacy data as well. If you have perhaps the system you migrated from to go to PeopleSoft, is that still around? Do you still have the database? There are ways we can retire that, get rid of the database, and bring it all together. We can actually bring your legacy data together with archive data so that you have it in one complete store, right? So there's lots of techniques to deal with data overload. Also, by copying less data to our non-production environments. Employing test data management strategies, which really means let's provide test data that is not our full copy of production, but perhaps a subset, a representative sample, a sample that will get all of our test cases done, but yet it's not extra data that we don't need, or training. Do we really need all of the data? So let's take an example, 500 gigabyte PeopleSoft database. If we're able to archive a decent amount of that, let's say we're able to archive even 200 gigabytes of that. Now we have a 300 gigabyte database that we now copy out instead of 500. So I'm saving 200 gigabytes for every single copy I make. So before you know it, I'm at a terabyte of savings right out of the gate. Now, if I'm actually spinning up a new environment, a development environment, do I need all 200 gigabytes, or can I get by with 10 or 50, 20, even 100 gigabytes would be a saving. And also, when I do that, do I need the real social security number from production, or can I use a fictional one that looks and feels real, still processes the exact same way in PeopleSoft, but it's just fiction and it's secure? That way I can have more testers in. I can open it up to consultants and perhaps an outsourcing situation. And when you get to that point, it's like, hey, go ahead, look at the data. I don't care. It's not my data. It's just fictional. Yet you can still have robust testing. So that's what you're after doing there. Just a real quick story. We had an environment where we needed to do some PeopleSoft work in conjunction with security work, and it took 2 weeks to gain access to the non-production test environment because they kept giving us one page, and then we were like, well, we need to look at another page. We need to run a report. They gave us view only, and it wasn't working for the work we had to do. It took 2 weeks to get there. When we finally privatized and masked their environment, it took 2 hours to grant access subsequently because they didn't care. They just gave us all access to everything in PeopleSoft, gave us all pages because all the data was fiction. So that's what you want to do there. And that's really what we're talking about, securing sensitive data. Have a strategy for production and non-production. In non-production, the cheapest, easiest, best thing to do is turn that data fictional wherever it's sensitive. So to get there, we really have this process of defining what is sensitive. Is it personal data? Is it customer data? Is there confidential data? Discover where that lives. And we know the PeopleSoft data model. We have templates already built to solve this for PeopleSoft. So the discovery process for us is usually just finding out about customizations or how you've configured PeopleSoft and where that sensitive data lives. Then, of course, protect it. So in production, you want to do your monitoring. Get your security vulnerabilities taken care of. Analyze and monitor that security is tight and close. And then in non-production, let's mask and make that sensitive. And maybe there's a different level of monitoring that we do there. And then, of course, report on the whole thing. Make sure that we can prove what we're doing to auditors or for compliance reasons. And let's have that be already built and automated. So, that's really what you want to do. Manage the data, volume, and secure your sensitive data. And then, of course, encrypt, right? Encrypt. This is how we can start to deal with things that are outside of the application's control, like the database files. Those should be encrypted if they're not today. Your content, documents, PDFs, HR forms, and things like that, your reports. Encrypt everything, right, top to bottom. Make sure you have that segregation of duties. So monitor the privileged users. Let them have the access they need to do their job, but let's just make sure we're monitoring them and flagging or preventing things that are out of policy. And then we have a different security group who controls those policies and the monitoring itself. And then this way you can facilitate the work you have to do, but stay secure at the same time. You want to ensure your maximum security configuration. So best practices, industry best practices and standards, you want to be able to scan your environment for weaknesses. And on that front, let's do vulnerability assessments across the stack, from the file level, database level, your middleware level, your app servers, and other web servers, and then all the way into the application. You want to scan for vulnerabilities. Make sure that database is configured to optimal strength. And the rest of your stack is also tight. Your servers don't have weaknesses where that can be exploited. And even in the application, you want to look at the security of PeopleSoft, scanning your operator IDs and what's set up inside of PeopleSoft security, but also even extend that all the way to the application. In AP, for example, do I have somebody who can create a vendor, approve a vendor, input a voucher, cut a check, run the check process, and then delete that vendor? They could be cutting checks to themselves. You don't want that. In HR, do we have the ability, as people who should see payroll, people who shouldn't? Do we know that they can and cannot see that? So again, going beyond row level security, but a policy layer in the application, and make sure that that's where it needs to be. And then, of course, your structured and unstructured data. Structured data in the PeopleSoft database, but again, those outside sources, your resumes, your HR forms, your PDFs and reports. And again, make sure we're monitoring outside. So some people employ using logging to keep track of what's happening in their database. They use the database logs. There are solutions out there that scan the logs or monitor the logs. There are solutions from Oracle that actually will monitor. However, all of those may have weaknesses in them. Number one, the logs can be modified if somebody has the right level of access. So again, under segregation of duties, and we even feel monitor outside of the application, even monitor with a perhaps even a non-Oracle tool to make sure that you are really covered and you're really segregating out the security layers. So again, how do we do this? So at BTRG, we really have built solutions, and we focus on those solutions. So I just wanted to touch on those really quickly. But essentially what we've done is we've rolled all these best practices for PeopleSoft up into a solution we call Security Factory. It has all of the best practices I just talked about, but essentially in a box, right? So out of the box, you will get the ability to subset, archive your data, monitor separately with InfoSphere Optum for data management, and InfoSphere Guardian from IBM to monitor separately and ensure segregation of duties, and then the AppScan product to look at the application for weaknesses, and then we've built Data Masking Factory to make the security implemented faster with automation and make sure that you can roll it out across your enterprise quickly and easily. Vulnerability assessment to look into that application and make sure that there aren't weaknesses in PeopleSoft security, as well as the database and middleware. And then data explosion to really enhance your testing creation. So in data explosion, it's really a data generator. We can manufacture test data that's fictional, but yet realistic, and realistic usability for testing, but yet it's secure. So you can see some of the benefits here. Again, finding and fixing those vulnerabilities, secure and prevent cyber attacks, monitor the activity to make sure you're secure and full segregation of duties, real-time data masking and non-production. Again, this way you'd be happy to hand a hard drive full of the data to somebody because it's all fiction, right? And certainly increase the quality and security of testing through that generation of fictional data that I talked about with the data explosion feature. And certainly automating the auditing and the compliance, right? So that, again, that define, discover, protect, monitor, and report, all baked into a solution out of the box. And then we have another webinar in this series. The second webinar really talks about data growth and what that means and goes into more detail. So I'm not going to touch on this too much, but just know that we've also rolled up a similar thing. So as I talked about data growth being a gap in your PeopleSoft security, dealing with that, we have a factory approach there with, again, some of our solutions specifically for a campus. We've got an add-on that works for them. If you're a project-centric organization, an add-on there. But again, factory approaches and leveraging IBM leading products. So the idea there is keep your data growth in check, reducing footprint, getting secure, but at the same time solving data growth and total cost of ownership, right? Bring that down through a lot less data being stored and managed, right? We like to think that storage is cheap, but in reality it's not when you fully burden it with what it takes to manage, the impact it has on your testing cycle because you're waiting for refreshes, and the effort that it takes to deal with large data volumes. So that concludes the content that we had. Just wanted to give you some sense of, this, we call this our tag cloud. Just covers all the kind of things that we work with in the information governance practice. Big focus on PeopleSoft because that's our history and we have deep experience and expertise there. You can see all the things we do around data governance, so it's a lot more than security, but security is really a big trend. We're really focused on data growth and data security trends because they're where we see a lot of cost and a lot of opportunity for benefit to our clients. And so, we base our strategies for PeopleSoft on Oracle best practices that we know from working on that product for 20 years, with IBM's really industry-leading information governance solutions and our solutions on top that really drive the value and speed the time to value. So if you are attending Oracle OpenWorld this year, BTRG will be there in San Francisco at the Moscone Center. Our booth is 3726 in Moscone West. We're also hosting a happy hour at Novella on the 24th at 6:30. So if you're interested in joining us for that happy hour, certainly you can send us an email at our email address, which I'll show in a minute. We'll also be at the IBM Information on Demand Conference, which is at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, November 3rd through the 7th. If you are interested in attending that, you can use our promotion code G13BTRG to get $100 off the registration. And I think that's good until mid-September, September 13th, I think. At this conference, I will be attending at our booth and at the conference, and I'll be giving 2 presentations there on security and the InfoSphere Optum solutions, and possibly co-presenting on 2 more. And we'll have a booth there, number 320. So if you have wanted to leave some time for questions, I think we have about 15 minutes or so. Here's some contact information. I'm pretty active on Twitter, so if you're on there and you want to follow me, it's BTRG_Mike Martin. I put a lot of links to content out there about information, and certainly happy to connect with you on LinkedIn. And if you have any questions, you can email me at mmartin@btrgroup.com or infogov@btrgroup.com. So I'll leave that up. Let's look at some questions. I think I see a hand raised. Kelly had a question. Okay, so I see we had a question about the breakdown of costs for the $194, and that's according to the Ponemon Institute. Let's see if I can see the answer there. But if you look at the Ponemon study, which we'll be happy to send you, it sort of breaks down the cost there. And costs tend to break down in data breaches to the investigation to find where that data breach occurred, mitigation of the any action. So if you have to do a credit report for people whose data has been breached, if you have to shore up your security, so various costs that go in there. But we'd certainly be happy to send that information out to you. So what do we define as a breach? Grace asks, what do we define as a breach? So again, we think we take a broad definition to what we think is a breach. It could be internal resources, and we actually find that a lot of breaches are from internal. So you hire a contractor, or you have someone outside your organization who you grant access, and maybe they even see data they're not supposed to in the course of their normal activities. Maybe they see salaries that they're not supposed to find out. Even just them seeing data can be in violation of HIPAA regulations or other regulations. So even that can be a breach, all the way up to someone logging into your system, stealing data, taking credit card numbers to resell them, or identity theft, stealing trade secrets, or finding out who your vendors are and then using that information in a competitive fashion against you. So then we had Sheila typing, one of the big issues we find in PeopleSoft is unencrypted bank accounts and financial supply chain. Yeah, so again, when it comes to non-production, you can mask those fields so that the bank account number that is seen by people working in non-production can be a fictional one, completely fictional. Now in production, you will need to leave that data. The way we work with production is what we sort of call masking on the fly, or even masking on the glass. So the theory here is that when we mask non-production environments, the best thing to do is actually to change that data right in the database, to go ahead and update that value from my regular social or my real bank account number to some fictional value with the exact same format. That will pass all the edit checks that it needs to, so it works. It's just as good as the real data, but it's not the real data. That's the goal. Keep it as close to the real data as possible, just completely fiction, so that it has no value, and it's very, very difficult to exploit then by someone. In production, though, you have to leave the real data in the database because somewhere along the line, somebody really does need to use that data. So what we do there is we can create policies and determine and weed down the exact number of people who are only supposed to see that data. And then anyone else, as it comes up out of the database, mask it on the fly so that when it comes up to their screen, they see either obfuscated, redacted information, or they see fiction. And that's possible to do with our solutions. You can actually mask in production, on the screen, but not in the database. And then, Jatinder asks, how can we mask the data? So certainly the IBM Infosphere Optum solution is what we usually recommend to masking data. It has robust masking capabilities built into it. It has templates designed for PeopleSoft. So right out of the box, you're going to get a PeopleSoft solution. It's designed exactly to mask your PeopleSoft environment. All of the sensitive elements are already laid out and defined where they exist. PERSNID, the person table, all of those tables are already, in there. And there are routines to turn credit cards into functional working credit cards. When we mask credit card, if it's a Visa, it stays a Visa. It's just a fake one. Social Security number is the same. By country, you can mask Social Security and national IDs. So very, very robust masking. We've implemented it for many, many clients, and it really works very well, and it's a very strong technique for securing non-production. And then another question here. We would like to set up quarterly audits to monitor and view only to our view only and update users, 45 users. Easy way to pull information from PeopleSoft to do a user audit. I think I might have to find out a little bit more about what you're doing there on that one, Kelly, but certainly if you only have 45 users, I'm not sure why you're getting 12,000 rows, but there's certainly those reports built into PeopleSoft that you can run that will show what access you have. We have a tool that we call a vulnerability assessment, which will actually list out for you the users that you have. It's independent from PeopleSoft, but it will scan your PeopleSoft security tables and let you know if you have any settings in there that you shouldn't. So one example is having an operator ID without a corresponding employee ID matchup. That's kind of a risk there. So we'll highlight those. And the vulnerability assessment actually kicks out a scorecard. So it's a 0 to 100, and that tells you your security score. So anything less than 100 you want to look at, and then it lists the details there. So it lists by operator ID where you have problems. Each rule that's checked, it will list the details. You can click on it and see the list of actions to take with a recommended mitigation strategy. So it'll say, you know, these 10 users have access they're not supposed to, or you've got 5 people who have all pages, and all pages is still showing everything it's not supposed to. Here's the list of what's wrong, and here's what you do about it. So pretty robust way of dealing with that. And then it says what Oracle, so another question is what Oracle automated tools are available to mask data? What would be the cost involved in securing field level data using automated tools and non-automated tools, right? So we really don't recommend manually masking data or masking data with scripts. We recommend using a tool set. That's your most robust, easily maintained, and best solution going forward. We tend to work with the Optum solution because it's already built out for PeopleSoft. Actually, some of the Oracle tools do have some masking capabilities. PeopleSoft has some scripts in HR that you can run. So there's lots of areas to look at. Certainly would be happy to have a more detailed conversation with you offline about some of your choices there. So we can certainly follow up with you on maybe a more deeper dive into what all your choices are around masking data. But we do find many of our clients interested in masking data, and it's a great technique for securing, non-production, which is often very much more open. And then we have another question: how complex is data masking in PeopleSoft? So certainly it can be. It can be quite complex, actually. It depends on a few factors. Certainly, first factor is what modules do you have? What suite are you in? How many modules do you have? Which is why we like to leverage as much acceleration for this process as we can. So like I said, the Optum solution and BTRG's data masking factory solution has been designed for PeopleSoft. We have a template already in there for PeopleSoft, describes the sensitive data with masking routines already built out. You can decide if you want to use brand new names that come with the solution, or if you want to leverage your existing data like your PS names table, and then we chop it up and change the names into fiction to generate new data. But when you look at masking an ERP package like PeopleSoft, you have to be careful. You have to look at not breaking the edits. You can't put all X's in, or they even want to put the same phone number in for everybody. That doesn't really facilitate testing. You don't want to just put garbage in there, miscellaneous characters. That doesn't work either. The data has to look and feel real, but we don't want it to be real. I don't want Mike Martin's name to be in there. I want it to say John Smith or Roger Jones or something like that. I don't want my social, but I want the social security number edits to pass. I want the phone number to pass. I want the address to pass. So that's the approach we take, and it works very well. Stick close to real, make it fiction, pass all the edits, make PeopleSoft work, make the testing still robust, still super effective, but do it in a way that doesn't break the application. Okay, so follow up to that, does it impact performance? So masking will certainly not impact any performance of using the application. So if I go to run a report or I pull up a screen after environment's been masked, zero, absolutely zero performance impact, because I've already changed that data in the database. The performance is the exact same as it was before I masked, because the data is just coming up from the database as normal. Where you would see perhaps a little extra time is when you generate an environment, so because you have to mask that data when you take the production data out. So the way we facilitate that is we actually usually start from a gold copy. So in some downtime, we refresh the data from production, maybe even just refresh the delta into a copy, and then we spawn our non-production environments from that gold copy. And that actually makes the creation of non-production environments much faster, especially if we incorporate subsetting as well. So if I started today with a 500 gigabyte database, I archive it down to 300 gigabytes, and then when I go to create a test environment, I only take 100 gigabytes. Now you're just copying and masking 100 gigabytes of data versus the 500 before. So that's kind of the approach. Again, combine things together to streamline everything and make sure that there is no impact. Okay, we do have just a minute or two for some more questions if there are any out there. Thank you very much for those questions. They're really, really good, and I really appreciate your attention to today's webinar and that interaction with questions. just leave another second or two for more questions if you have them. So again, I'll put the contact information up there. Certainly welcome more Twitter followers and connecting on LinkedIn. I love to use social networking as a way to connect with folks. So if you're interested, I certainly would be happy to connect with you there. And any more information that you want, or if a question occurs to you, certainly you can send me an email at mmartin@btrgroup.com, or you can send generic questions or requests for pricing or anything like that to infogov@btrgroup.com. I hope we see you at Oracle OpenWorld and IOD. I want to thank everyone for taking time today to join our webinar. We really appreciate it. Very happy to connect with everyone. And I hope you all have a great day today for the rest of your day. And we'll go ahead and close it out if there's no more questions. Thanks again. Take care, everyone.